Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we really are going to have so much fun today. As I was preparing for this, I thought, I'm kind of interviewing my boss, in a way. And so please join me in welcoming Gregg Greenberg to our program today. Welcome, Gregg.
It's great to be here, Deb. And I wouldn't say that you're in my employ. You are a member of our beloved podcast family on CSuite Radio. And I just happen to run CSuite Radio, the general manager of media for CSuite, and you are on the CSuite network, one of our featured, as all of our podcasts are, one of our featured podcasters. So it's very exciting for me to be on your show today.
And you and I, I think sometimes we're in webinars and things at least once a week, and it's always so much fun because you're in them in a variety of different roles that you have. And so that's what's very fun. But then you also have your outside of C-suite life. And we're going to have fun talking about that too. But let me tell people a little about you, and then we will dive into this. So as he said, Gregg is currently the general manager of media at the CSuite Network and host of CSuite TV Insights. See, bet a lot of people didn't know that we even have TV. Prior to joining CSuite, he was the lead anchor at TheStreet for more than 13 years. In that position, he interviewed CEOs, fund managers, professional athletes, entrepreneurs, and best-selling authors, both live and on tape. At TheStreet, he hosted The Real Story podcast and wrote the widely read column, The 5 Dumbest Things on Wall Street This Week. Oh my gosh, sometimes I bet you had a hard time narrowing that down. Before becoming the lead anchor at TheStreet, Gregg worked in finance at Lehman Brothers and Fleet Bank. May they rest in peace. He received his MBA at Cornell's Johnson School and his undergraduate degree in history from Amherst College. Outside of yes, he's a very smart dude. Outside of journalism, he wrote and produced the independent film Friends and Romans, starring Michael Rispoli, Annabella, Sciorra, and Tony Sirico. Oh my, those are fun names to say. And I don't think I probably got any of them right, which won the Napa Valley and Boston Film Festivals in 2015 and received 3 stars in Newsday. He also wrote and produced a trio of off-Broadway plays titled 3, yes, count them 3, Clemenza and Tessio Are Dead, The Stella and Saps. All 3 premiered at the New York Fringe Festival and sold out their respective runs. So as I said, oh my gosh, Gregg, you are quite the Renaissance man.
I'm something, yes. Thank you. What a wonderful introduction. We could end right there, and then my mom will be happy.
And isn't that what's most important? We have to make our mothers happy.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right. Mine's 89, and she listens and she watches the podcast. So
well, it's amazing, that the folks in the older generation are so adept at technology nowadays.
Right.
I still read the paper, the newspaper, at Tangible, but I think I'm the last person in my building. Everyone else just gets it on their iPads and they watch all their videos on their iPads and their phones. But thank you for having me on your show, and thank you for the lovely introduction.
Yes. Well, I always like to find out how my guests got to where they are today. We just went over a little bit about that. But how is it that at this point in life, you discovered that, all these various things are your passion in life? Because it is several different things.
Well, I guess as you get older, you sort of are able to narrow down, your passions. You're able to really discern and delineate your passions. So I really didn't know what I wanted to do coming out of a liberal arts college. As you mentioned, Amherst College, cute little college in Massachusetts, liberal arts. So I worked for a Japanese company, and I bounced around a little bit right after college. I waited tables, very important.
Oh, yes. You've got that wrist thing going.
Table waiting skills. And then I went to business school at Cornell. And then after business school, I was at Lehman Brothers back in the late 90s. And I did well there. But then the tech bubble came around. People forget about the tech bubble because we had the housing bubble. And after the tech bubble, I had to find something new to do because if you remember, they weren't doing IPOs and there was the whole pets.com and everything was kind of crashing back then. So one of the things I always loved to do, and I thought was a not so secret skill of mine, was my ability to write. So I got a job over at CNBC, the financial news network, writing the news for them. And over there, I met Jim Cramer, who a lot of people know from Mad Money on CNBC. Booyah, he's a big stock prognosticator. And he brought me to his website, which was called TheStreet, to write about personal finance and mutual funds. And just while I was joining TheStreet was the advent or the nascency of internet video. So when I would be writing about a mutual fund manager, I would have that manager come and we would speak on video. And I know today you and I are speaking over Zoom and it seems old hat, but at the time it was a very new occurrence for people just to go online and interview someone else. And over my years at TheStreet, I became the interview guy. So it was really wonderful. I was able to interview a lot of interesting CEOs and authors and athletes, and they would come to sit with me over at TheStreet, whether it be Jack Welch or Thomas Friedman, Joseph Stiglitz, a lot of Nobel Prize winners, and they would come to my show. Then they go to CNBC or Bloomberg, and there was a whole business circuit. And I did that for about 13 years. Well, on the side, when I wasn't writing about finance, and as you mentioned, one of my best known columns was at TheStreet was called The 5 Dumbest Things on Wall Street This Week, which was always fun to write. And on the side, I was writing plays and screenplays because I found that's where my passion was. That was my creative outlet. And I wrote some plays. I wrote a movie, which was produced, as you mentioned. It was a mob comedy, which starred a lot of the members who were on The Sopranos, including Tony
a lot of those Italian names. Holy schmoly.
Yes. Tony Sirico, who everyone knows as Paulie Walnuts, was in it. Annabella Sciorra, as you mentioned. Michael Rispoli. A lot of The Sopranos were in my movie, and it was a great experience. And since then, I've continued to write screenplays and plays. And as you said, sometimes you arrive at your passions later in life. I know when I was younger, I wanted to play sports, but now that I'm older, I like writing things, creative writing.
Right. And what I love is that how diverse you are in your writing. Financial writing is obviously very different than fiction. Well, maybe. It's supposed to be different. And so do you find it difficult to switch between, or, do they overlap? I mean, I find that very curious because a lot of people focus on one or the other.
It's a great question. So my column at TheStreet, which was one of the largest columns on Wall Street at the time, was called The 5 Dumbest Things on Wall Street This Week. And that allowed me to kind of put an edge, have a snarky view, make some jokes. So I was able to write very creatively with that business column, which suited me very well. My sense of humor, and it wasn't a dry business column. I've written enough of those as well. So when it comes to my creative writing outside of work, I really find that when you open up the newspapers, as I said, I read them like this. But there's a whole lot of stories out there, and you just have to find one that you're passionate about and write about it. So, for example, my first play was called Clemenza Tessio Are Dead. And what I did is I rewrote The Godfather, just like Tom Stoppard rewrote Hamlet in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. Right. So I kind of used that concept, and I wrote that as a play. It was my first play, and it ended up being in the Fringe Festival and then produced, and it's been produced a few times in the last 10, 15 years. And then from that, I wrote a screenplay. So I think you also have to keep pushing yourself. And I guess at some point over our conversation, we can talk about it, is during COVID, I was worried that people would never be able to put up plays again. So I wrote a book of short stories called Effing Argentina and 10 More Tales of Exasperation.
I love it.
I had a fun time writing that book as well. So I think you draw on your life experiences and you push yourself, and eventually and it could be writing, or it could be acting, or it could be dancing. You just have to find your creative place. And it's really important as you get older.
Right. So let's talk about the book. I love it. I thought it was so funny. And, you talk about telling your stories, and that's really what the book is. And yeah, it's got that word in it, but we'll say it is effing Argentina and 10 More Tales of Exasperation. And it was so fun reading it, partially because I read a lot of business books for the podcast, and it was so not a business book. And it was a very quick read too.
Well, there are some business lessons in there. Yes. So just to let you know, how the book came about is that when I was reading the Wall Street Journal one day over the course of the COVID, we were quarantined. My family was locked away somewhere. I saw an article about how the country of Argentina once again might have gone bankrupt, and BlackRock, which is a major American bank, was owed about $500 million, and they were teed off at the nation of Argentina, who might have defaulted or devalued their currency. And I said, it's an interesting thought that, what would happen if you anthropomorphize all these entities and you made Argentina a person and the bank a person. And one day Argentina knocked on my door and said, hey,
can you loan me a bit?
Can you loan me $500 million? I owe BlackRock. And I was just thinking that, how that would play out, because, in the very end, that's exactly what happened is Argentina, they owed BlackRock money, and they got to, just like if you or I owed money to someone, you have to find a way to pay someone off, pay your debts. And I turned that into a story, and I sent that story around. Then I said, something, it's exasperating. It must be very exasperating for the folks at BlackRock, and they're probably saying effing Argentina owes us money. So they're exasperated. And I thought there's probably a lot of other ways that people are exasperated, especially during COVID.
Right.
And I ended up coming up with 10 more, and I put them into a nice little book.
Right. And it was cute. I mean, some were clearly your personal experiences. At least your family names were in there. And then there were others that weren't. I have to admit, as a person who has dogs, I love the Baxter story. I just thought that was so cute. And we have beagles, so people always rush up to them and say, "Can we pet your dog? Can we pet your dog?" And and we have one named Diva, and she is. And she would be the one that would say, don't effing touch me.
Well, that's a fun story. So once again, all the stories about little exasperating slice of life stories, if you will, that happens to me. And I live on the Upper East Side, so there's a certain Upper East Side view of the world, if you will. Some people could say it's Woody Allen-esque. I don't know if you want to say that as much anymore. But that particular story, it's about a person like myself who's walking their child to school, and someone with a dog on a leash just lets the dog run up to the kid.
Because it's a friendly dog.
Yeah, but the kid is scared, and the person with the dog on the leash doesn't kind of realize that they're more worried about their own dog, and they don't see the fright in the kid's face. So it unfolds from there, and it's just one of those ways where the parent of the kid wanted to tell the person who's walking the dog in a nice way, get your effing dog out of my kid's face. Can't you see the kid is frightened? And it happens a lot in New York, I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah. It happens not just with dogs. I mean, sometimes with people too. they get in our space. And especially now, it's like, no, social distance. I feel like I should carry a stick, right? the 6-foot stick to keep people
a measuring stick. Yes.
Yeah. But it really was it's almost like the stories were parables, because we could, I think, in all instances, put ourselves in those situations.
Yes, I am divine, Deb. Thank you.
Yes. And I mean, it was funny. It was especially funny when I realized that some of them were about your family. The drive-through one was hilarious.
That's a fun story.
Yeah.
I mean, that one is basically, it's a story about a person like myself, and driving the family down from New York to visit relatives outside Washington, D.C. over Thanksgiving. And I had to, as the parent, and I know my dad had to do it as well.
Oh, yeah.
You're driving the family, the kids are in the back, and they're loud, and you're telling them to shut up, reaching back.
Yeah. Don't make me stop this car.
Well, yes, on the Jersey Turnpike. Don't make me pull over onto the elbow. And it was one of those things where everyone's real hungry, and you finally get the food that you really wanted because you're driving the car and you haven't eaten since lunch and you worked before you left, and you just don't get what you want, and how frustrating or exasperating it is.
Oh, yeah.
So I think a lot of parents have felt that exasperation, and I'm glad you were able to recapture that exasperation.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the funny thing is, I'm not a parent, but I know that I did that to my parents, and even just my husband and I, we go through the drive-throughs, and we're starving to death, and all these things, and then you open it, it's like, this isn't what I ordered.
Yes. It's a major decision when you pull up to speak into the clown's mouth and decide what you want. There's no turning back because there's cars beeping behind you.
Oh, I know. And you can't turn back. You're stuck. They've got you in those the little things. It's just I found it fascinating that you wrote it during COVID, because some of the things were, of course, exacerbated because of COVID, and we're still trying to figure out where the heck we're going.
Yeah, the stories, there's some surreal ones like effing Argentina, which I'm taking a whole country and turning it into a person. And there's another surreal story where I turned Officer Krupke from West Side Story into a person, and he's visiting his agent.
Right.
And his agent is trying to get rid of him because he's got no parts for Officer Krupke. And then, there's ones which are a bit more lifelike. So, for example, one of the first ones is called Weinberger's Back to School Night, where it's about a guy who's my age. He's divorced, although I'm not divorced, but he goes to his son's back to school night, and he's just really tired. And it turns out that everyone in the class, all the parents in the class, they just keep raising their hands
and asking stupid questions
that only pertain to their particular child. So, and it really frustrates him to no end, it exasperates him to no end, and he calls them me questions because they only have to deal with the person asking the question. So at the end, he's like, effing me questions. And there's some twists in that particular story. And I really enjoyed writing that one because once again, it's another slice of life here on the Upper East Side of Manhattan.
Right. But it really can happen anywhere. I mean, that's the thing is, when we start thinking about what makes a good story, it really is that it could happen to anybody. Your circumstance could change and you could be in that, in that position. I mean, all these things, and part of it, like I'm a huge science fiction fan. And so I always love thinking, oh gosh, if I were, but the stories are all, you've got your heroes, you've got your heroines, you've got something happening and then a resolution. I mean, that's what the stories are.
Well, it was really my first entree into writing short stories. And there's a certain style to it. So some of my favorite short story authors, I mentioned Woody Allen before. He used to write some short story books. I mean, he's so prolific. He wrote Without Feathers and some of the other ones. And my humor certainly has a lot of Woody in it. I like P.G. Woodhouse, who wrote the Jeeves stories, the Bertram Wooster Jeeves stories. And there's always a little twist at the end where the butler Jeeves has to get Bertie Wooster out of trouble. Right. And then I like the Sholem Aleichem stories, which ended up turning into Fiddler on the Roof. Those are called the Tevye stories. And I was reading those over the course of the COVID. So I was reading a lot of short stories, and there's a certain cadence to them. You got to start with the problem, and you got to have a twist at the end, and all within 15 or so pages, or something to that effect. So that, just like when you write a movie script, generally they say in a movie script it will be about 90 pages. And then you break it down into thirds. So 30, you establish your characters, and then the middle 30, everything starts going well for the character, and then in the final 30, things go wrong, and at the end you have a resolution. Right. So there's a certain process for short story writing, which I really had to kind of hone over the course of COVID, which ended up being these 11 stories.
Right. Yeah, because if you're writing a novel, you get very descriptive. But in the short story, people are filling in the blanks themselves. And you have to write it in a way that they can fill those in and it still makes sense.
Yes. I don't have the temperament to write a novel. I mean, I suppose in my writing evolution, going from play to screenplay to short stories. I suppose a novel would be somewhere in the distance, but there's a lot of words in a novel. I mean, the beauty of writing a screenplay is it's mostly dialogue and a few stage directions. Same thing with a play.
Right.
But when you're talking novels, there's a lot of words, adjectives, adverbs, nouns,
I know.
a lot of.
Oy, you know, all that stuff that you got to put in there.
Jam those in there.
I know. You know, and I think one of the things that I loved reading, you know, when I was reading about this was, you know, as we said at the start, I know you through CSuite, and you know, and in many cases, you know, in all cases, I mean, you know, you're very professional. You know, a lot of times the tie, yep, you know, and especially like when you're doing TV interviews and things like that. And this was a whole different side of you, and I just thought that was so fun to kind of find out. Oh my gosh, Gregg isn't always the suit and tie guy.
Well, when I'm doing my interviews, then I'm going to dress accordingly. But
Yes.
I'm on your show, and
You're cash today. I love it.
I wanted to dress writerly, you know. So
yes,
I'm in my own home, which is, you know, my kitchen is, we're all working out of our homes, at least for the next foreseeable few months or weeks or whenever Omicron dies down. But, you know, once again, I think one of the things, and I have my kids, they're in junior high school and high school, and it's hard. And I encourage my kids not to be afraid of pursuing their creative side, because especially when, you know, I have young boys, and it's easy. And I know when I was in high school, I wouldn't have gone for the drama club or done anything like that, because I was an athlete. I played soccer, basketball. I didn't want to hang out with the theater kids or talk about you know, science fiction movies or something like that. I was in my own lane as an athlete. And then you get to college and you realize there's a whole other world out there that allows you to be yourself. But then to a certain extent, after college, you kind of get narrowed back again, because you have to find a job and concentrate on that job and make sure you do that job well. So once again, it takes a little bit of time as you get older to say, you know, I have a little bit extra time now. I'm secure in my job. I got a family. The kids can go play by themselves. I can pursue one of my passions. And I certainly encourage that. And that's what I've done. And I encourage other people to do that as well.
Now, you know, you mentioned that you wrote it during COVID. Do you think if you had, you know, if we hadn't had this forced lockdown, you know, would you have written a book, or would it have been still the I'll do it at some point type of thing?
I think that's a really fantastic question. I was feeling a lot of exasperation. So I think that the COVID really calcified, or really brought things, you know, focused my mind into what drives me crazy. So from that perspective, the COVID was very healthy for me, finding, you know, 11 things which really drove me nuts. And once again, these are not world-ending things. You know, the fact that at the drive-in, your kids are driving you nuts and you got the wrong condiment on your burger. I mean, that is not going to end the world.
No.
That said, it is frustrating at the time. So I was able, because of my shortened fuse due to COVID, because I really felt like any moment I could lose it. And you can ask my kids and they'll verify that. They'll vouch for it. Because I did feel so short fused, I was able to identify a number of things which were irritating me, frustrating me, exasperating me. But whether or not it was COVID, which maybe go to the particular short story form, maybe I would have gotten there eventually, maybe.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, we did hear a lot about people who all of a sudden had extra time. You know, a big part of it was no commute. You know, for many people, they gained several hours every day.
10 pounds.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You know, we everybody had the COVID-19, right? You know, and so, you know, and we also discovered that working from home, and I've worked from home for 20 some years, but you know, for the people who, you know, were used to being in that office, there were, you know, an awful lot of time there was, you know, the chit chat time, the talking to people at the coffee maker, all of those things. And so when you took those out, an 8-hour day went to 6 hours. You were like, whoa, I got everything done in 6 hours. Now what the heck do I do? Because we don't want to spend time with those kids. You know, but it, you know, it gave people the time to really stop and think. And I think that's why we saw like the Great Resignation and all of those things. People really stopped to think, okay, what is my passion? And what do I want to be doing? And maybe it's because there was a kind of a life and death element in all of this that made us think, ooh, if things change tomorrow, what, and you talk with a lot of executives and very high level people. What do they say about all of this? Because they're kind of the ones that can't just jump ship. They've got to stay there and be running.
I think you're right. There's a certain double-edged sword about this whole working from home, the ability to work from home. Because I know that in one respect, you eliminate the commute, as you're right, and you free up time. But on the other hand, is when you're worried that you think that people are thinking you're not working because you're home,
right? You
work harder. So if you say, well, they probably think I'm just watching reruns or watching the market or people can't see that I'm at my desk working, right. So I better work harder, or else they'll catch me. Or what if someone Zooms me when I'm not there? They're gonna think then I'm at the gym. So to a certain extent, you work harder, or maybe you just work in bursts harder at home because you worry that other people are gonna think you're not working because you're working from home. However strange that sounds, I'm on the replay.
I understood what you meant. I mean,
right, as long as you understood what I meant, that's what counts, Deb. But on the other hand, you're absolutely right. It does open up a whole pocket of extra time, especially you're not having to do the commute and worry about the commute and make sure your tie is right. You can literally just pull on your sweats and go to the couch, and it saves you a lot of time. Right. And that with that time, if you use it wisely, you can create something else, whether it be improving on your job or something, maybe with your own personal pursuit.
It was interesting. I talked to somebody, and this was back in 2020 when we were still, really in the midst of things. And she hated that she lost her commute time because that was when she listened to podcasts. And she said, she just loved that. And she felt guilty doing that when she was home, or she'd get interrupted and things like that. And so she started having faux commutes. If she normally commuted 30 minutes, she would drive 15 minutes and then come back 15 minutes. So she still had, she wasn't, breaking quarantine or doing any of those things that we weren't supposed to do, but she still had that me time, where she was able to do that. And I think that's one of the things that people are still having to adjust to.
Well, from a business perspective, the whole world really was changed, because a lot of people thought that because you couldn't go to restaurants and stores, everything would fall apart. But what you found is the elevation of delivery services for food and shopping online, and people were looking around their houses, and everyone thought, wow, people are they can't go to work, so they're going to be in financial trouble. But people were still working at home, and they were looking around their house, and they're saying, I want to fix the drapes, I want to add a new couch, and people were shopping more, which was surprising, even to the economists and all these Wall Street people that forecast things that were going to go down. Right. If you look at the S&P last year, was up at 29% after a high teens performance the year before. And so all the so-called smart people, they totally missed what would happen if you shut down the economy and kept people at home. So, and they certainly didn't foresee me or anyone writing a book like Effing Argentina.
Right. Yes.
None of the smart people saw that.
No, nobody thought that was going to happen. And I think that's so true, that they didn't know what was going to happen. And it's funny because as Americans, especially, I think we've been known for our resiliency. You tell me you got to take off your shoes and do this and this and this before you get on an airplane, and we go, okay. and now it's second nature. Now, granted, I've got clear, and it's not like we fly that much anymore, but you adapt. And I think that's what we saw with the businesses that failed or succeeded, was they adapted. I have friends who also live in New York, and they said, all of the ones that all of a sudden had tables out on the street, and New York itself, of course, made it possible, by changing how the street flow was and things like that. Clearly that can't last. And I think it's probably gone back to normal, but yeah, people just adapted.
Yeah, I think the long tail effects of COVID, we're going to be seeing for years, and whether it be outdoor dining or the end of a lot of commercial office space, or the changing in the ways people commute. Because quite frankly, the public transit still hasn't come back to normal, because people are either worried about Omicron or they're working from home. So I think that as you mentioned, I think the long-term effects of COVID are going to be felt for years.
Right.
And it's been interesting. But I certainly was wrong in the very beginning, and as a lot of people were. They didn't see an economic boom as a result of it.
Right. And we all have to laugh that they had said 2 weeks, be fine in 2 weeks. And of course we all went, and no. I don't think that especially initially, nobody saw that it was going to be at least 2 years. I think my original thought was a year. It was going to take a year for everything to, flare up and then, get back to normal. And of course, normal is not happening anymore either.
Well, certainly the world has changed over the past 2 years. I mean, you had a lot of the BLM marches, you had January 6th, and now you have Russia and Ukraine. So there's some very, and you have rate hikes on the way this year. Interest rates are finally going to be heading in the other direction. So there has been some really tectonic shifts economically, politically, just even in sports. Tom Brady's retiring. Things are changing, Deb.
And Kansas City Chiefs lost.
And your Braves won the World Series a few years ago.
I know.
Things are really getting crazy.
Yeah, and then Georgia football. I mean, it's funny. So that really was one of those weird things. I think they researched it, and the last time a major area won 2 national championships was like 1922. I know that SEC football is big down where you are. Oh yeah. And I'm still a University of Colorado person.
Excuse me?
I'm still a University of Colorado person.
Oh, you're a Buffalo. I did not know
I'm a
you were
Buffalo. And so it's, SEC and ACC. I mean, you add those two in there, and football especially is a religion down here. And then you toss in the Braves. Yeah, then we might have a football team, things like that.
Once again, New York hasn't had any professional sports to speak of in the last few years. Our soccer team did well, NYCFC, but other than that, we should talk about business as opposed to professional sports in New York, because the Mets, the Yankees, the Knicks, the Nets, Islanders, Jets, certainly, and the Giants, they're all a mess. So
I know. See, and I'll either pick Georgia for doing stuff, or my Colorado Avalanche are doing really pretty well too.
All right, the Avs.
Yeah. So, but it's just, I think one of the things also with all of this is we've discovered that it's fun to talk with people about other things. I talk a lot on my program, obviously, about the fact that we work with people we know, we like, we trust, and and we're expanding that because we're not seeing them in person. So we're reading it online, and we're talking about it in Zoom and things like that. And even, just looking around and seeing what's behind people. I've got several little critters and, things like that.
Those are interesting points, because it's one of those things you really can't choose your neighbors. I remember I once went to Finland and they were talking about the Soviet Union next door, and they said, well, you can't choose your neighbors. And it's similar, in work, you don't really get a chance most of the time, unless you're doing the hiring, is to choose the people you work with. So, and you don't really always know that much about them, because you're seeing them in the workplace, and you want to keep the work at work and the home at home. But I think there's been a greater consideration for people. Right now, I'm speaking to you from my house. There's a good chance that a kid might walk by. And I think that the line between work and home, people have grown, have developed a greater consideration for it. So for example, if someone's kid buzzes or drops something, I think people are more tolerant, because they know it could happen to them. So I think from a having some confidence or some give or take for the people you work with, just some greater appreciation for them. I think you're making a very good point, is that now I know what other people are going through in their homes as they work. And I think they have the same consideration and appreciation as I do.
And it's kind of fun. It's funny. I just had this discussion yesterday on Facebook, because, I was bemoaning the fact that it's been 2 years and people still don't know how to be professional on Zoom. So then, of course, it flared up into what the heck was professional. And part of that was, okay, you need to figure out how to put your camera so that we're not looking up your nose. We're not looking at the ceiling. the side of your head, all of these things. And then people said, well, what about kids and pets? And I said, I got to tell you, I like that. I like it when the kid wanders through, the pet strolls across the desk. I've been known to talk to them. I had somebody the other day, I was having, it was just a kind of a quick little online thing, and his 3-year-old needed attention. And I said, okay, bring him in, and because he was trying to shush him, I said, no. And so I talked to the little kid and I said, now tell me what you're doing. And he said, grandma came and fed him lunch. I mean, it was just the cutest thing. But part of it was, I thought, he needs to get used to this format.
Right.
But yeah, it's, to me, unprofessional is, you still have the unmade bed behind you and things like that.
You're giving someone a look into your life, a closer look than they've ever seen before. So you want to have, hopefully it's, this is a wall behind me. Hopefully someone appreciates the artwork.
Yes.
Target sells art too.
I know. Hobby Lobby.
So we have seen more into other people's lives than we ever thought we will. And I'm not sure we're going to turn back. We're going to find out. And people are learning that everyone's a TV star nowadays through Zoom.
Yep. Oh yes, we're just all here. And I think one of the things that I have found is I love the online networking part. Now, part of it is, I laugh and I joke, and I have to put shoes on. But I haven't been to an in-person networking event since before COVID started. And here in Georgia, people aren't real big on masks and social distancing. That's fine. Works for them. Doesn't work for me. I miss the social aspect of seeing the people, eating the Georgia catering. Holy schmoly. But for me to be able to meet with people from around the world sitting at my desk, that's fabulous.
Yeah, the CSuite network. So I run CSuite Radio and CSuite Media. But the CSuite network, we used to have a lot of events over the course of the year, small events and big events. And it was always nice seeing people in person and getting to see them again after a long absence, and you hear speakers. And I certainly miss that as well. I think we're going to be coming back to that over the course of the next few months, because people do need to, as Barbara Streisand said, people need people. Those are the luckiest people in the world. So we are coming back to that. But in the meantime, what we have certainly found is that online networking is tremendous, because you don't have to worry about parking. You don't have to worry about feeding 500 people. You don't have to worry about so many things if you're all gathering over Zoom. You don't have to worry about people being loud or people banging in the next room. Everyone just comes to the Zoom conference room, and you can speak. So it's going to be a mix of that going forward. And it's just, we're just going to see which way it's going to be, more Zoom, less in person, or more in person, less Zoom. And we're going to be working that out over the course of certainly my life.
Right. And I mean, that's one of the things to brag about CSuite. I mean, they pivoted almost right away. I think you guys started having online the next week. We shut down.
Necessity is certainly the mother of invention.
Yeah. And I was looking at my calendar. I have 3 CSuite events this week. Now I try to not, 2 is, because you really should be doing real work stuff, but, it's
networking is real work, Deb.
Well,
networking is real.
And the good programs, and I think that's one of the things, whether it's through CSuite or wherever, I think that's one of the things people are looking for. And the cool thing is we're able to find it. We're able to find that, we never could have seen a speaker, in certain circumstances without traveling to them, without, the big expense, all of those things. And now we can see those fabulous people, whatever the organization is, and it's great.
I mean, I remember as a kid watching the Jetsons, and you only dreamed about having phone calls, where your boss would call you on a screen, and and George.
And we all thought, that's the silliest thing in the world.
And now we can do it. But I am looking forward to, as you mentioned, the time when we can get together for maybe not as much, but it will be fun when we can finally all get together a little bit more.
And I think hybrid, especially for events, is definitely going to be the key, because we can definitely, participate from afar. And, and so we don't have to have the travel expense. And I think a lot of companies are going to, they have saved so much money by not doing that. That's, but I was talking with somebody for the podcast last week, and we were talking about the fact that at a conference, the best part of the conference is usually what happens in the hall. Right. It's who you're meeting with. And so back to that whole social aspect.
Yeah, most deals don't get done in the conference room. They get done on the golf course, or or at the water cooler, or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think we're gonna see how it all plays out. It's still, as they say on Wall Street, in the early innings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course we have no idea, because it's one of those things where where COVID can do all sorts of things. I mean, and who knows what could come up. But as I said, we just adapt and we go on, and it's fun. And it has been a challenge. I mean, especially for people who are very social. But I've also heard introverts say it's been very hard on them too, because they actually get more introverted.
Understood. And certainly I have kids, and when the kids were out of school, that was really a hard time. Mm-hmm. But, to go back to the things that we offer at the C-Suite Network, we offer podcasting, which is a way for people to speak, and everyone can be a radio star now, maybe not as big as you, but everyone can be a radio star now. People can put their own videos and share their own videos. People can network, and it's not just the C-Suite Network. It's a lot of different networking organizations. So even when you're trapped at home nowadays, there's so many different ways for people easily to have the technology to get out. And, my mother lives alone, and she's out on about an hour away on Long Island. But the technology now is easy enough so she can figure out Zoom. So she can speak to her grandkids wherever they are. So the technology has really kept people together during a difficult time. Right.
And I love that it has in so many ways brought us together into a much smaller world. I don't know how this happened, but I had 2 podcasts in a row in like a 5-day span where I interviewed these absolutely lovely, delightful gentlemen in Dublin. I told him, I said, obviously something's trying to tell me to get back to my roots and I need to come visit Dublin again. But, and they looked at me and they saw the red hair and the freckles and they said, yes. But yeah, and that's of course the beauty of technology. Long ago when I started this, it was a live broadcast. I trotted my little self down to a studio and my guests.
How long have you been doing the Power Hour?
So it started actually as a different format. We started as The Socialite and talked about social media. So it was a little over 10 years ago when social media really started kicking up. And, and so I went into the studio. It was a studio in Denver, and my guests came in and we talked about, social media and how to use it as a business tool. Then it kind of evolved. I moved, so that it made the commute just a little bit long. But then we did it as still a live broadcast. We used Skype and, worked most of the time. But of course, when it failed spectacularly. And so then we really went to pre-recording, which is fantastic because, we can do these at any point in time. That's why I can have international guests, things like that. And my producer, bless her, we get a whole bunch. I recorded 5 last week. And so we'll do a whole bunch, get it ahead. And then, I've got a couple weeks off and then she, gets me going again. But, it's that. And I think that's part of why podcasting has taken off is technology has done such wonderful things. And we're able to find guests from around the world on subjects. There's anybody who says I can't find anything to listen to. Obviously, they're not trying.
There's a whole lot of podcasts out there. But the important thing, Deb, is that when you make appointments to interview these people, just tell them there's only one time zone. It's Eastern time zone.
Yes.
Because that I found is one of the hardest things about this whole COVID thing is you have people on the West Coast and in Europe, and you have to match up the time zones. I tell people there is only one time, and it's EST, Eastern time zone. Okay, that's everyone out there and listening to the Power Hour. Just remember that.
Yeah, it's very complicated, especially since we're from Colorado. So that's 2 hours. My mother's 1 hour behind. I never know where I'm like Waldo. I don't know where I am.
Keep it simple. Eastern time
just
zone.
Eastern. Yep, I know. So, I love, let's talk a little C-suite business here.
Absolutely.
When I started, and it's been about 4 years ago, I started with C-suite. There was 50-ish podcasts. I don't believe you were even there. And now, I mean, the goal is a wonderful, fabulous goal. I'm not sure what it is. So I'm
take over the world, of course.
Yes, that's it. World
domination, like Pinky and the Brain.
Yes. And so it's been fun to watch C-suite grow. It was growing before COVID, but of course that just kind of accelerated a lot of things. And so we've got all the podcasts, and then C-suite TV. So talk to us a little bit about C-suite TV, because I think a lot of people really don't realize it exists. Yeah,
it's what we found over the course of the last. I've been with C-suite about 3.5 or so years. So I met Jeffrey Hazlett, who's the CEO of C-suite. He was a guest on my show when I was at TheStreet. He was talking about one of his books, and then he brought me over a few years ago to try and grow the media business. Because they were trying to find ways to get more podcasts and more TV shows. And what we found is because of the boom in podcasts, that's really taken a lot of our attention. So as you said, we had about 50 podcasts about 3 years ago. Now we have over 350, and we help people monetize them. A lot of people think they're going to become big radio stars and make a lot of money from advertising.
No,
it's not that easy. I mean, and one of the things I always tell people is like, you got to do it like Deb does it because you enjoy it. If you think you have a gregarious personality and people like you and people are gonna listen to you, it's hard to get an audience.
Right.
I mean, it's really hard to get an audience. So you really have to love speaking to people, and because you have to get it edited, you got to put it out there. There's some work involved to getting a weekly podcast or a bi-weekly podcast. So that's really grown organically for us. We've done a great job of growing that. From the video content, that's a little bit tougher to monetize, because one thing that we've noticed is that people can just put their video up on their own sites or on YouTube.
Right. I do that.
Free. And so it's hard to make money from it's hard to monetize video content as easily as it is right now to monetize radio, which is interesting though, because a lot of people thought that radio was dying, because no one's really driving their cars as much, or people don't really pay attention to radio as much because it's satellite radio. So it just turns out that you have this big boom in podcasts where there's 1 million podcasts, though there's a lot of churn. A lot of people stop and new people start. So we do have C-suite TV, which is a place where people can put up their video content and share it. But generally right now, a lot of our focus and our profits have come from the podcasting side, just like this show.
Well, and you do the program Insights, and I love it because usually it starts as a webinar. So we all get to participate and see, the discussion. And so again, it allows us to, as C-suite members, to really connect and meet people that we probably never would have in any other type of situation.
So, we have wonderful programs at the C-suite Network. For all your listeners who haven't considered joining, please consider joining. So we have digital discussions, executive briefings. So we have some really smart people like yourself who'll come and they'll speak on a particular subject to our members. And with regard to my particular show, I host those digital discussions and I ask questions, because that's my background coming from being a host of my own show at TheStreet. And C-suite TV Insights, that show that I host, it gets picked up on some captive networks like United Airlines and some other airlines. So I like doing the video. I like podcasts. I like all the media. I like people getting out there and expressing themselves. I think that's what's important to me.
Right. And it was funny.
Building their businesses, making money at the same time.
And I was talking with another C-suite member last week, and he said, he wasn't sure. He said, he'd been thinking about doing a podcast, wasn't sure, all these things. And I said, well, the first thing to do is to be a guest, be a guest on several programs and figure out, do you even like it? And then realize it is a lot of work. Thank heavens for my producer, because she's the one who does the scheduling, the coordinating with the guests, all of those things. I still do my own editing because, it's easier for me to do it than to try and tell somebody else what I need. It's just,
well, you're so good. I mean, frankly, we've been speaking for about, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It feels like no time has passed. And if I was your editor, you're going to have a very easy job because quite frankly, everything's flown very well. And that's a testament to you and your ability to interview. And I think what the podcasting has done is, when I was younger, basically you would watch, Johnny Carson, or, you had one guy who would interview, right? And then maybe, you would go see the talk shows, Meet the Press or Face the Nation. So there were only a finite number of interview shows. Now, if someone says, I like interviewing people, I like asking questions, and I'm an inquisitive person, you can have a podcast and do it yourself. And I think that's what's so invigorating for people right now is they say, something, I don't have to be a gorgeous movie star. I don't have to be a comedian. I just have something that I'm interested in. And it doesn't have to be business. I mean, it could be ornithological. It could be birds. It could be, it could be.
I was interviewed on the Boob Report.
Which one?
The Boob Report on breast cancer.
Oh, okay. There you go.
But yeah, there's a podcast out there for everything.
Yeah. And I think it's great. And someone could be an expert in their own little world. People don't always have to play to millions of people. Right. Even if you're playing to 50 or 100 people whose opinions that you appreciate and whose feedback that you're excited about, that's what's important. And I've put on movies that have played to full houses, and I put on plays that have, played to 10, 15 people. And when those 10, 15 people really love it and are so excited about it, you have to take heart in that. Even though it wasn't 100 people, those 15 people, you may have changed their lives or just their evenings, but it's exciting to get that feedback. Right. And that's what podcasting offers someone like yourself.
Right. Well, I tell people it's just like marketing. You have to figure out who you need to market to. For everybody who says, well, golly, I want to be an influencer with 1 million fans. If only 10 of them would actually buy what you're doing, then those are the 10 you're talking to. And that's very hard for people to realize, okay, what is my niche and how do I need to figure out those numbers? But yeah, you need to really determine who
it's
is
nice.
It
would be nice to speak to 1 million people.
I know.
But it's just not, it's
not in the car.
Yeah, it's a long shot that if it actually happens,
right.
It would be nice if it came about that way. But once again, I think you make a fantastic point that if you are speaking to people about butterflies and that's your subject, and you get the best butterfly people in the world listening to your podcast, you have to be thrilled when that comes about.
Right. Yeah. And it might only be 10 people, but if they're the right 10 people, then that's what counts.
I agree.
So, we've only got about 5 minutes left. What's in store? We talked a little bit about, maybe having some more in-person events and things like that, but what do you see as, or just in business in general, what do we see coming up in the next year or two?
I mean, I certainly think from New York, I think New York's going to open up very soon because New York City, I'm just looking out and we've had a blizzard, we've had Omicron. So it really, we're as we move into the spring, you're going to see really soon New York, and I'll assume a lot of the other urban places that have been locked down a little bit more. I really think that they're going to pop, and I think people are going to be very excited to get outside. So I think you're going to see more in-person meetings. Hopefully, as I said, we'll see that at the CSuite Network. And I think hopefully we'll start seeing more theater. As I said, I've written some plays, and I know in New York City, you're seeing Broadway. The lights have really been dim or off for a long time.
I know, and that just breaks your heart. Oh,
yeah, because I mean, and it's it is such a life source, life affirming place for people who come from out of town, all over the world to go to Broadway. And we only have about 10 shows that are open right now. So we need to get Broadway going back again. You need to get those actors working, and once that starts happening, you're going to see a lot of people will be in better moods, certainly in metropolitan areas. And I know I will be as well. So I think the warmer weather is going to help, and the lessening of Omicron, the theaters opening up, and I know that people start, going back to restaurants and the restaurants having waiters to serve those people.
Yeah, that's the tricky part now.
Yes. And then hopefully I'll be inspired, and then maybe I'll write something. Maybe I'll write a play or a movie or something to that effect.
I love it.
It'll get me going as well.
Yes. And of course it's interesting, excuse me, here in Georgia, we never really shut down too much. And so it's been kind of interesting, but yeah, I think
along those lines, a dialing down of the political rhetoric and the political heat.
I live in Georgia.
And the differences between Georgia and New York. I mean, the fact that you're saying we never shut down and I'm saying that it's still kind of tight up here. I think I'd very much like to dial that down as well. And just get us back to one whole woven together, united.
Yeah. And that I think is going to be a challenge, especially from a political perspective. I think it's going to take a while, but I think I think it was maybe the perfect storm to have a lot of that happen because we were isolated, and then we got in our head, and we were watching whatever network, and all of those things. And when we get back to being in person with people again, we can't call them idiots. Yeah, we can, but you might get punched.
I think that there's a certain freedom people think to say whatever they want because there's distance in between you.
Yeah, that screen is a good shield.
Yes, and anonymity when it comes to Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, or Instagram or whatever those things are. I don't use them that often. Postings, there's a certain anonymity that people think they can hide behind. And I think it's a great point when people are actually next to each other. The whole idea of a red state or a blue state or whatever, it just kind of melts away when it's just people.
Yeah. What do we need to do to make things work? I think is the thing.
When people are less exasperated.
That's it. So speaking of that, tell us how they find your book and buy your book.
Thank you. I'm going to hire you as my publicist. You can find my book, Effing Argentina and 10 More Tales of Exasperation. You could find it on Amazon, or you can just Google that, and there's plenty of places to buy it. And the reviews have been good. We've had some 5-star reviews, and as you said, it's a very quick read. One of the reviewers said is generally you find a book like this in your bathroom, but this one is so good you can put it on your night table.
Oh, I love it. That's a very good review.
Out of the toilet and into the bedroom. I love it.
There could be another story in there.
Yes.
Well, if someone wants to connect with you, how do they find you?
I think I'm pretty Googleable as well. You can find me on the CSuite Network site, or Gregg, Gregg, .Greenberg, Greenberg, at c-suitenetwork.com. You can find me there. And I'd love to hear from the folks who've read the book, or maybe they've seen my movie, Friends and Romans, which is on Amazon now. It used to be on Netflix, but Friends and Romans is a very cute movie. You can watch it with the kids if you like. Highly recommend that. And then maybe I'll have a play at some point coming to a theater near you when all the theaters are opening. Yes. I don't know if I'll be on Broadway, but maybe I'll get to Broadway someday. That's a goal. I'll put that one out there for you.
And then we're going to see you getting one of those trophies. Holy schmoly. And we can say, we knew you when.
Yes. You knew me when I was working my way down to the middle.
That's it. Well, Gregg, this really has been absolutely delightful. I am so glad that we did this. And like I said, it's been fun getting to know you as the person. And, and that's what's been so fun about this.
I've had a great time, Deb. You've proven your skill once again as a fantastic interviewer because you did it with such a marginal interviewee like me. So thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, it's always fun to be on the other side of the microphone, right? You never, it's like, hey, it's very relaxing. I like it when I get interviewed.
Good. Well, you are good on whichever side of the microphone. And thank you so much for everything.
Well, do you have any final thoughts you want to leave everybody with?
No, once again, I reiterate a lot of the topics that we discussed during the interview is certainly everyone, don't be afraid to pursue your creative passion at whatever age you're at. And I certainly have, and I found it tremendously rewarding. And it's something that I try and teach to my kids is don't worry that the other kids in the school want to put you in the jock lane or the theater lane. You get into whatever lane you want and you'll be a better person for it. And you'll be more fulfilled because of it.
I love it. I love it. What a great way to leave. I'm Deb Creer. I've been having an absolutely fantastic time getting to know Gregg Greenberg. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.